Welcome to Deep Thoughts, a podcast designed to take you on an introspective journey into the mindsets and strategies that fuel personal growth. In every episode, we'll explore the intersection of psychology, spirituality, and real-world tactics, guiding you through powerful methods to elevate your health, wealth, relationships, and overall well-being. From deep dives into transformative habits and mindsets to candid discussions about the challenges we face in today's fast-paced world, Deep Thoughts is here to remind you of the untapped potential that lies within. If you're ready to disconnect from the distractions and connect with the tools and insights needed to create lasting change, this show is your sanctuary for self-discovery and empowerment. Tune in, reflect, and take action towards a more vibrant and fulfilling life.
Today, we're tackling something I think we all struggle with, multitasking. Is it really a superpower? Or is it a productivity killer?
Ooh, good question.
So get ready, because apparently our brains might not work the way we think they do.
That's what's so fascinating about this, right? Like, we think we've got it figured out. And, it's funny, we use the word multitasking like it's something to be proud of.
Oh, totally, like a badge of honor.
Yeah, a badge of honor. But the truth is, for most of us, it's more like task switching. And that comes with a whole bunch of hidden costs.
Okay, wait, so you're saying when I'm answering emails during a Zoom meeting and trying to write my grocery list at the same time, I'm not actually doing those things simultaneously.
Exactly. I mean, it feels like we are.
Right.
It feels we're doing all these things at once. But in reality, our brains are just rapidly switching back and forth between these different tasks.
Huh.
Forbes even reported that only a tiny percentage of people, like 2.5%, can truly multitask effectively.
2.5%. Okay, so I'm definitely not in that elite group.
So unless you suspect you're, one of the chosen few, you're probably task switching too.
Okay, fine. So I'm not a multitasking superhero. But what's the big deal with task switching? Is it really that bad?
Well, think of it like this. Every time you switch from one task to another, there's this thing called a switch cost. Basically, your brain needs to reorient itself, Got to pull up the right mental files for that new task. And some research suggests that this switching back and forth can actually zap up to 40% of your productive time.
Seriously?
40%. Yeah, it's like hitting the pause button on your brain over and over throughout the day.
Whoa, that's a big chunk of time just gone.
It is.
And I'm guessing the more complex the tasks, the bigger that cost becomes.
Absolutely. Imagine a driver who's on their cell phone, even a tiny delay in their reaction time because their brain's trying to juggle talking and driving can be the difference between an accident and avoiding one.
That's terrifying. It makes you realize how much we underestimate those split-second delays caused by task switching, especially in a world that's full of digital distractions.
Exactly. I mean, think about it. We're bombarded with notifications, emails, social media all the time. It's like our brains are stuck in this never-ending game of ping pong. And I think one of the biggest culprits here is media multitasking. Checking your email while watching Netflix or scrolling through social media during a meeting. Does that sound familiar?
Totally guilty. I mean, all the time. Is there any way to even measure how much we're doing this? Is there a test or something?
There is. It's called the Media Multitasking Inventory, or MMI.
MMI, okay.
It basically measures how much a person engages with multiple media streams at the same time. So let's say you're watching TV, but you're also on your phone scrolling and maybe even responding to messages on your laptop. That's classic high media multitasking, and the MMI would capture that.
Okay. But is there any evidence that all this media multitasking is actually affecting our brains?
Well, there's some intriguing research out there. It suggests that heavy media multitaskers might actually have some differences in their cognitive abilities. For example, some studies have shown that they might have worse working memory.
Wait, so you're telling me all that time I spend scrolling through Instagram while watching TV might actually be making me worse at remembering things? Is that why I can never remember where I put my keys?
Well, it's definitely possible. Correlation doesn't equal causation, but the connection is definitely there. Think about it. When you're constantly switching tasks, your brain doesn't get a chance to really encode information into long-term memory. And heavy media multitaskers might also struggle with long-term memory, and they might experience more frequent attention lapses too.
Wow, that's pretty mind-blowing. So all this time we've been trying to do more. we might actually be making ourselves less effective in the long run.
It's a definite possibility.
Wow.
And it makes you wonder, what impact does this have on our ability to reach that state of deep concentration where we do our best work, that flow state?
Yeah, flow state. That's that feeling when you're so absorbed in a task, the time just seems to melt away. But is task switching really the enemy of flow? Like, are they totally incompatible?
Well, think about it. Flow state, as Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi described it, requires deep engagement and minimizing distractions. It's about being completely immersed in whatever you're doing.
Okay, yeah, so it sounds like task switching is basically the opposite of that. Like, we're constantly interrupting our brains just as they're about to hit that sweet spot of focus and creativity.
Exactly. And the problem is, in our quest to do more, we might actually be hindering our best work and our creative potential. We overload our cognitive resources, lower the quality of our work, and increase our stress levels. It's kind of a paradox.
Yeah, it really is.
It's like, we've bought into this idea that being busy is the same as being productive.
Right, like the more we cram into our day, the more successful we'll be. But it seems like the opposite is true.
Exactly. We end up sacrificing quality and focus, and in the process, we might even be hurting our cognitive abilities.
That's what freaks me out the most. I mean, we talked about how heavy media multitaskers might have worse working memory. And honestly, I've noticed that in myself. Like, it feels like my ability to remember things, even like simple things, has gotten worse the more I've gotten used to juggling multiple screens.
Yeah, that's a really common experience, unfortunately. When we're constantly task switching, we're not letting our brains consolidate information into long-term memory. It's like trying to write a letter on a piece of paper that keeps getting blown away by the wind.
That's a great analogy. So instead of asking ourselves, how can I do more? Maybe the real question should be, what truly deserves my undivided attention?
That is a brilliant way to reframe it. Multitasking keeps us in this reactive state. We're just constantly responding to the next ping or notification instead of being proactive and intentional with our time and energy.
That's like we're on autopilot, just letting our devices and to-do lists dictate our actions. No wonder we feel so scattered and stressed all the time.
And speaking of stress, remember how we were talking about flow state? Well, not only does task switching prevent us from reaching that flow state, but it actually increases our stress levels too.
That makes sense. When you're constantly switching gears, your brain never gets a chance to settle in and relax.
Exactly. And here's the thing about flow state that's really important. It's not just about productivity, it's also where a lot of creativity happens. When we're in that state of deep focus, our minds are free to wander and make connections between seemingly unrelated ideas.
That's so true. It's like those aha moments. They come when you're least expecting them, but only if you've given yourself the space to think deeply.
Exactly. And that's why constantly task switching can be such a creativity killer. We're essentially slamming the door on our subconscious just as it's starting to warm up.
It's ironic, isn't it? We try to do everything and we end up doing nothing well.
Yes. We spread ourselves so thin that we lose the ability to really dive deep and engage fully with the things that actually inspire us. And the more we multitask, the more we reinforce that cycle of distraction. Our brains become wired for constant stimulation, and we lose our capacity for sustained attention.
It's like we're trading depth for breadth and losing sight of what truly matters. This reminds me of that study we talked about earlier about those brief mental blocks that are caused by task switching.
You mean the ones that can cost us a significant amount of productive time?
Exactly. And it's not just about the time it takes to switch gears. It's the lingering cognitive residue that prevents us from fully engaging with the task at hand.
Yeah.
Like each time we switch, we leave a little bit of our attention behind.
It's like trying to solve a puzzle with some of the pieces missing. You might eventually figure it out, but it's going to be much harder.
This is making me want to throw my phone out the window and go on a digital detox.
Well, a full detox might not be necessary for everyone, but it is definitely important to be mindful of how technology affects our focus. We have more control over our digital environment than we think.
Like we talked about before, turning off notifications, setting boundaries around screen time, creating spaces for focused work.
Yeah.
It's about taking back control.
Exactly. And it's not just about our individual actions, we can advocate for changes in our workplaces and schools too. Imagine if we had meetings that were designed to minimize distractions.
Oh, that'd be amazing.
Right. Or, email etiquette that encourages thoughtful communication or dedicated spaces for quiet contemplation.
It would be a whole different world. It
Yeah.
really makes you realize how much our environment influences our focus. But even small adjustments can make a big difference, right?
I totally agree. It's about creating a culture that values quality over quantity, deep work over superficial busyness.
I like that. Deep work over superficial busyness.
Because in the end, it's not about how many things we can juggle, but how well we can engage with the tasks that matter most.
It's so well said. It feels like we've been sold a lie this whole time. That to be successful, we need to be constantly on juggling a million things at once.
It does feel that way, doesn't it? But as we've seen, the research tells a very different story.
And it's not just about our individual productivity either. This myth of multitasking can have some pretty serious consequences, especially in certain professions.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, imagine a surgeon trying to, respond to text during a complicated surgery, or an air traffic controller trying to manage multiple incoming flights while also checking emails.
The stakes are way too high for divided attention in those situations. But even in our everyday lives, think about how much suffers when we try to multitask.
You're so right. Our conversations become less meaningful, our meals less enjoyable, our hobbies less fulfilling. We're constantly skimming the surface, never really diving deep into the richness of each moment.
We're trading depth for breadth. And in the process, we lose sight of what truly matters. This reminds me of that quote by Thoreau. He said, "It's not enough to be busy. So are the ants. The question is, what are we busy about?"
That's a perfect way to put it. In this hyper-connected world, the real challenge is to be more discerning about where we direct our attention, to choose quality over quantity, focus over frenzy.
It's about reclaiming our agency, and making conscious choices about how we spend our time and energy. And as we've discussed today, it's not just about productivity, it's about well-being, creativity, and living a more meaningful life.
Couldn't agree more. By resisting the urge to be constantly on and cultivating habits that support focus and deep engagement, we can unlock so much more potential, both personally and professionally.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the multi-costs of multitasking, it's clear that our brains just aren't wired for it. And while we might not be able to escape the demands of our modern world entirely, we can choose to resist the urge to be constantly on and instead prioritize focus and presence in our lives.
And remember, you don't have to do it all at once. Start small, be patient with yourself, and celebrate every step you take toward reclaiming your focus.
So to all you deep divers out there, I'll leave you with this. What one thing can you do today to create more space for focus in your life? Maybe it's turning off your notifications for an hour, blocking off time for uninterrupted work, or simply choosing to be fully present during your next conversation. Whatever it is, I encourage you to experiment. Be curious and rediscover the power of single tasking.
You might just be surprised at what you can achieve when you give your full attention to the things that truly matter.
Until next time, happy diving.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Deep Thoughts Podcast. I hope you found insights and inspiration to take with you on your journey of self-growth. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to hit the subscribe button so you never miss an episode. And don't forget to follow us on social media to stay updated on new releases and exclusive content. See you next time, where we'll continue to help you grow and explore your full potential.